the good fortune of working with Hadoop, getting very hands-on with Hadoop and the underlying packages and services. And after going through, I guess you'd call it a life cycle of training and really self-learning, I felt it best to kind of rewind and play back my findings to a larger audience. Because I believe big data, Hadoop, social media, these are all topics that are on people's minds right now. And from a technical perspective, as I said, I'm a data guy, so information management, spend my life in that. So if your head's down in the current world, it's kind of difficult to pick your head up, look around, and see what else is there. So it helps to maybe have a guided tour through that process. And that's what this essentially is a 9-part series is intended to do. So then what we're trying to do is show big data, Hadoop, and social media in action. That's it. At the end of this, you should be familiar, maybe even a little bit proficient in Hadoop technologies, how to integrate, stream social media data to your Hadoop environment. Okay? When I say environment, we're talking about creating this, deploying it into the Amazon Web Services EC2 cloud. Okay? And all this can be done, as the title suggests, in less than a business day. This is a task. This is an activity. It's measured in hours, not days. And when I say hours, I believe basically a healthy afternoon could be spent just getting your environment up, streaming data, and playing around with it. So that's the intent, and we will show this in real time. So really, as I mentioned, there's 9 parts. So this first part is just an overview of the whole series, why we're doing it, some approaches you could use, and most importantly, why you would think about doing this. I remember I was at an Informatica World Conference in 2012. I saw a VP from Greenplum. His name was Michael Howard. He gave a pretty, it really stuck with me what he said. He said, if you have the opportunity, and if you have just a spare hour, he suggested, highly recommended, any IT professional, but he was targeting the Informatica World Conference goers. He recommended that we download a big data platform. He said, get hands-on with these technologies. It's worth it. It will change the way you look at what data can be, where it comes from, and ultimately how it's stored, captured, and provisioned. So that's kind of what Hadoop has done for me, at least. It's kind of opened my eyes to this other world. So that's the overview of the exercise. And this will be coming out in a series, maybe as a series in a couple weeks time frame. So part 2 will be, I'll show you how to set up your Amazon Web Services EC2 instance. There's this is probably the easiest task in the whole series, but it's necessary, and there's some things you should look for. Then we are going to install CDH4, which stands for Cloudera's distribution of Hadoop version 4. We're going to install that in the Cloudera Manager. Then we're going to register our Twitter app. Yes, when I say social media, we are going to stream Twitter tweets to our environment. So if you don't have a Twitter account, maybe this is time to get going. We're going to then install MySQL, configure Hive. Hive is basically, for those familiar with SQL, you're going to love Hive. For those who like writing MapReduce, well, you probably don't use Hive a lot. Personally, I'd rather write SQL or basically a query language like HQL, which is Hive query language, rather than write a custom MapReduce program. And I'll actually show that in this part of our series, actually what that looks like. A Hive query and the generated MapReduce program that runs. We're going to configure Flume. Flume is the streaming service that comes with Apache Hadoop. So it's an Apache project, and it basically opens up sources for actually sources or channels, lands to a sink somewhere in the Hadoop file system, and then I'll show you exactly how that fits together within this exercise. So finally, one of the last pieces we're going to configure Uzi, which is a workflow a service provided by Apache. We will run some basic Hive queries using ODBC. ODBC setup was not as straightforward as I envisioned, and therefore I think it's part of the learning process to see how that would be executed. And finally, we'll do the demo. We'll kind of tie everything back together, a demo and some final thoughts. Also, to sort of sprinkle in what you could do with it. Basically, after you stream the social media, how you could analyze sentiment, for example, using natural language processing, maybe some machine learning, and a little bit of data science. I admittedly am not a data scientist. That is a very unique skill set, one area which I have a lot of room for growth. So again, this is part one. We're going to provide an overview of the exercise, more so than we've already done. So the overview. You're probably asking yourself, why should I care about big data? Well, I think anyone who's read a major publication should probably be aware that big data is everywhere. And when we say big data, that can mean a lot of things. But if you just break it down, one IDC study estimates that in the year 2012, 2.8 zettabytes, that's with a Z, of information was created over the course of the year. That translates to 95 terabytes of raw information produced every second. I'm sure a lot of that is redundant. I'm sure a lot of that is noise. But when you can access it, assimilate that information, and mine it, there's a lot of opportunities there, which is the second bullet here. Big data business opportunities. So increasingly, organizations are beginning to see how in one area, social media, or even machine-generated data, which are two of the biggest drivers of big data growth. Data growth in general, but they're really fundamentally compose what big data is made of. You have machine-generated data, so could be a meter, a gas meter, it could be your devices. They all generate web logs. Basically, these all generate information that is valuable, so at some level. I think, and this is why we're going to focus on social media, this is one of the biggest business opportunities, is to mine social media. Just to give you some idea, Harvard Business Review, a recent survey suggests that 85% of organizations have funded big data initiatives or in the process of planning these initiatives. So that means there's commitment, and therefore the business recognizes potential value there. The one thing to make note of, there's opportunities, there's also risks of sitting idle given these developments. 70% of organizations are unaware of the impact that negative comments on social media has on their brands. That's based on a study done. And another study suggests that 56% of customers on Twitter tweet negative things about their company. So that's something that you would want to be aware of, and perhaps tailor services, responses, campaigns to that sentiment. Another item is a big data skills gap. So right now, you can see there's an opportunity, right? Hopefully I've made a case for it, but if you just do some research, you'll probably find that there's an opportunity there. Well, if there's an opportunity there, it's not being met by the skills in the market. The same Harvard Business Review survey that I mentioned earlier found that 70% of the organizations that they questioned found that there was a severe gap in analytical skills, trouble, difficulty finding qualified scientists, and that's one of the reasons why there's always a drift in this gap between IT and the business. IT moves too slow, they don't really get the business, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes that's why the business sets up shadow IT. Well, this is a prime example where if IT does not develop the capabilities, is not responsive to what the business says they see as an opportunity here, then that gap is going to widen. And really, this is if you look at this particular exercise as a learning, something you can do on your own, you can help bridge this gap. And it's only to your benefit to be aware of what these capabilities are and to be knowledgeable in the technology stack. So I'm sure you're saying, okay, I do care. And how do I get started? Well, this is kind of the conversation I would have with myself 2 months ago. So I got started, and I kind of started, did a few false starts, I would say. So to get started, you really have to think about what direction do you go in, just from a technical perspective, right? So which technology? If you just look and do a cursory survey of the big data technology market, you'll see things like NoSQL, which means not only SQL, which covers a lot of sort of these newfound exotic databases, Cassandra, MongoDB, these might come up. So these are basically, if you think about it, they're document stores, and a lot of them have, you could write JavaScript on top of them, and you can query the information through JavaScript, or maybe a language like Squirrel. I played around with MongoDB. I could tell right away that it was not for me. Okay, so that's why I highly recommend working with Hadoop. Hadoop covers all these areas when it comes to big data capabilities. It can handle unstructured data. That's a big plus. It can scale, so it's got the scale. It can stream data. It can provide query capabilities, some batch processing, and ultimately, the best thing about it, and I mean, all these products are basically free, right? So, but Hadoop is free, right? You can download it, and if you get a distribution, you might sign up for some services, training, and support. But if you just want to learn, it's free. There's no reason why you shouldn't download this stuff, okay? There's nothing in the way of just getting your hands on it, access to it, and it's free. So here's a question then. So if I've convinced you Hadoop is, and by the way, the adoption in the market is there, right? So Hadoop is becoming a standard technology in the space. So here's a question. Which Hadoop distribution? There's not just one, there's several. So you really have to think about which one you want to go with. Let me explain what I mean by Hadoop distribution. So for those who don't know, Hadoop is open source software. It is an Apache project, so makers of the web server, Tomcat, etc. They also have the open source projects underneath Hadoop. So one thing you could do is you could build Hadoop from scratch, from the source. You could download the source code from Maven into an environment. You could also download the packages themselves, but there's benefits to actually going with a vendor that distributes Hadoop. It's because essentially it's like kind of doing, as my manager says, if you want to do math without a calculator, definitely go with the Apache, download the source code or the package route. But if you want to just get the software so that you have the environment up and running, recommend going through one of the vendors that distributes Hadoop, and I'll name three: Cloudera, Hortonworks, and MapR. There's others as well, but those are the main ones. And the reason why you'd want to do that is because they take care of all the moving parts. These are independent open source projects. There are changes on their own life cycle. So the vendors like Cloudera and Hortonworks and MapR, they make sure that all these moving pieces fit together. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do math without a calculator. They do it for you. Okay? So that's what we recommend. Me personally, I would recommend Cloudera. Cloudera, I mean, it's not so much Cloudera versus Hortonworks versus MapR thing. A lot of the founding fathers of Hadoop, and founding mothers, I should say, are at Cloudera. But they're also at Hortonworks as well. I'm sure they're at MapR. They're probably all over the place. So one of the main reasons why I went with Cloudera is they have a manager. They have basically a console, which you'll see shortly, that allows you to administer the services, but I frankly use the command line. It's just a lot easier. The manager isn't a big selling point for me. What was a huge selling point was their documentation and their tutorials. The Cloudera tutorials were outstanding. It advanced my learning, and they really deserve a lot of credit for the resources that they provide in addition to the distribution of Hadoop that they offer. I thought about, and actually this gets to our next point here, which is on-premise versus off-premise. So before I started going down the Cloudera Hadoop path, I deployed Microsoft's, in the Microsoft Azure cloud, I had Hadoop on Azure and Microsoft uses Hortonworks. Well, when it comes to deploying Hadoop, I recommend deploying it in the cloud. If you can't spin up a new instance in Amazon Web Service EC2 or have your own account with Microsoft Azure, then you can easily, actually Cloudera has a VM image with everything already installed, VMware. You can download it and just basically get the VM player. But having it off-premise in the cloud, you can run it. It basically runs 24/7. So if you're streaming social media especially, and you really want to capture data, you just let the thing run for a week and check back on the data that's been gathered. And it's hard to do that when you're running VMware on your own laptop. At some point, you got to shut down. Okay. But, and then there's just the aspect of having it in the cloud and being able to spin it up, spin it down, recycle it. It's just a great way to run Hadoop. So, and one final thing is I probably would have stuck with Microsoft Azure, but my lease ran out, and here's a surprise. My emails and requests to extend the lease, my Hadoop lease, weren't responded to. So what can you do? So hopefully this makes sense. If you're asking me if this is a lot of work, it's not. This can all be done in hours. This tutorial will all be done in less than, I'd say, 2 hours. And I'm guessing it's going to be, I would say each step is about 15 minutes. That's what I'll try to keep it to, so it all adds up to under 2 hours. That's the goal, at least. So hopefully this is a convincing sort of way to anyone who was on the fence about getting hands-on with Hadoop, big data technologies. Hopefully this convinces you. So let me show you what we're about to look at. This diagram essentially describes the scenario. We have Twitter data. There are things being talked about. We are interested in certain topics. Just because it's relevant, we're looking at things, terms, phrases related to big data, data science, any big data technologies. Those keywords will stream into our Hadoop environment, which, as it's described here, is Amazon Web Services EC2 M1 Large, running on 64-bit Linux, Red Hat Edition, Enterprise Edition 6.3. So Flume is basically a streaming mechanism. It streams the data using a number of different sources. In this case, it's a custom source. We'll show that later. It will stream to HDFS. That's the Hadoop file system. And there are sinks, which basically are organized by year, month, day. That's how it's partitioned. What we also have is, so basically Flume lands it to Hadoop. From there you can run MapReduce directly against the files that are there on the Hadoop file system, or you can use Hive queries. So Hive queries is the way I sort of look at the world. And in the process, so if you just do a select star off of the tweets table, which is basically the structure on top of all the Flume data streaming, it's an external table for those familiar with external tables. The same concept exists in the Hive world. Basically, Hive will generate, if you do a select star, it's just going to select the data. It doesn't even write a MapReduce program. If you do a and any sort of aggregation, sorting, or filtering, for those familiar with ETL, those are kind of very special things. Hive will generate a MapReduce program. I will show you that in a second. And finally, Uzi is a workflow that runs in the background that basically will add a partition to the table to make the data available to it. It rolls it forward every hour because that's how we partition the data. It adds a new partition when we get to an hour. That's one of the major changes I've made to the Cloudera tutorial. This is all based on a Cloudera streaming tweets tutorial. So I've enhanced it basically to make this real time so that as it lands here, they've added a lag for an hour because there's a Flume temp file that's created once the data streams. So there's a lock on that file. So if you try to query the data while that data is in process or Flume's operating against it, you will get an exception. So we have created a custom jar, very simple Java code, to ignore those temp files. So Flume can do its thing, we can query the data, and it's as real time as it gets. We've also added to the tutorial by adding connectivity from Excel using ODBC, but it can be any ODBC client really. Okay? So one final thing I'd like to show you is here's my Hadoop sandbox. It's running in the EC2 cloud right here. I'm going to bring the command line up. So I'm right now logged in, SSH'd in, and I can access my environment. So one of the things I'd like to show you is this is just a simple command. I'm going to say Hadoop file system, cat for those familiar with it, concatenate. Right now it's going to issue a command against file system command against the Hadoop file system. It's going to look for files that begin with Flume data and look for data Dan Sandler. That's my Twitter handle. Okay, it's going to see if there's anything there, and while I have new map, there's been nothing tweeted by me on those topics that I showed earlier. We're going to change that. So right now I'm going to say I am testing my big data how to that will be posted on the YouTube. I will say big data rules. I will tweet that. Let's see how long it takes to get from Twitter to my environment. Right there. That was real time. I haven't done anything on my machine. I've done the same command. You saw it. That's how fast it is. When I saw this happen for the first time in my own environment, that's when I knew this was real. So what I'm hoping is that you go through this process, you follow along. There will be 8 more how-tos so that you can do the same thing that I just did. And it's not just a technical exercise. You get the data in this point and you can do a lot of analysis against it. One thing I'll show you while I'm here, I'm going to log into Hive. So this Hive is like doing SQL Plus on a server that's running Oracle, or a client that has the SQL Plus installed and you connect in. So this here is my job tracker. This is basically allows me to monitor MapReduce jobs running. So I'm just going to select count. This is very SQL-like, which is exactly why I like it. From tweets, just do a select count. So what this does, you're going to see it. Does some initialization. So at this point, I don't see anything running. Running jobs, there are none. Okay, but it will actually generate what that query does. Again, because it's aggregation, you can see here, it's generating a Hadoop job. And that's really what Hive does. It allows you to talk to the Hadoop file system using a very SQL-like very SQL-like queries. Generates the corresponding MapReduce code, so you don't have to write Java at the end of the day. And here I can see that the job is run, and you can see stage. Stage 1 is map. So basically, if you MapReduce programs, it maps the data, and then it basically will reduce and get it back from all the nodes, because essentially this could run on a cluster of 1,000 different nodes, and that's really the power of Hadoop. So if you're looking for performance, by the way, this is not a benchmark on Hadoop performance. This is essentially a sandbox. It's actually 2 CPU sandbox, okay? The idea would be, if this is the sort of thing you really want to engage, to leverage the full capabilities of Hadoop, you absolutely want to have a cluster of 50 or 100, something to make what I just ran, which is a simple query against 17,334 tweets, which isn't a big number in any sense of that's just a simple. So it took a little while to run, but as you can see here, it generates a MapReduce program. So there's some processing involved. There's some initial overhead just to get the query and the MapReduce program generated, and from there it runs through stage 1, which is map. So you have the task here. You can see what was run. You see what it was run against. So a lot of logging data here. Sometimes, you know, if it fails, you absolutely want to look into these logs. It'll tell you the exception. But in this case, everything ran. And then it reduces. So this is when it gets the data back from the nodes, and it reduces it. Okay. I think that's a simplified view of the world. Again, I'm not the Hadoop expert, but I know enough to do what we just saw. Okay. Three other things I can show you. This is the admin console. If you're interested, we'll get a little bit more look into this as we install. But you can see all the services are running. HBase is it's a Hadoop-enabled base. It's basically a primitive database right now. I don't use HBase at all, so I won't speak to it because I'm not that knowledgeable about it. I use Uzi, HDFS, and Flume you don't see here, but it's running in the background, so I'll show you how to configure that. This is basically just shows you the file system, so you could browse the file system. I can't really do it remotely. As you can see, it's trying to go to an internal IP address, which is running in the cloud. So I can get to this. This just tells me it's up and running. But if I had local access, I'd be able to show you that. I could SSH in and get access to it, but just so you know, you can also browse the file system through this mechanism. So that's my opening. Those are my opening remarks. It probably took longer than I wanted to, but I think it's very important to go through these steps before you actually begin the process. You have to think through how you want, because your time is limited, right? I mean, all our time is limited. You want to be efficient. You want to learn as much as you can in the shortest amount of time, and you want to have a real, tangible use case. And I think the streaming of social media into an environment like this and doing some cursory analysis, it covers a lot of ground in the Hadoop sense of in the Hadoop world. Technology-wise, there's coverage there. But it also is a universal use case. Like everyone can relate to. You want to measure sentiment. You want to gather the sentiment, the raw information, which is exactly what this is here. One thing I should mention is that file that I showed earlier, that's JSON. So if you're not familiar with JSON, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Okay, it's very simple. It's very object-like, so it's a very simplified, lightweight version of XML. And we'll go into this a little bit more, but basically it captures a lot of information, a lot about what was tweeted, who tweeted it, time zones, names, that sort of thing. So in social media sense, it's all about informed consent. Okay, and because everyone is consenting to sharing the data, it's all there for us. Here's my blog if you're interested. You can follow me on Twitter here. That's Data Dan Sandler. You can follow me on my blog. That's dataDanSandler.com. I'm always posting new stuff This is just a series of one, but I have a lot more content that I'll be putting here. You can vote on some of the polls I have, but if you follow my blog, you'll see some of the stuff put out there over the next several weeks. So I appreciate time. I wish you luck, and I hope you definitely get your hands on this stuff. It's enough. People talk about big data, but you got to do it to really appreciate it. Okay? Take care.